Hello, it's now 2:00 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks for joining the National Reentry Resource Center's webinar on effectively implementing family engagement and involvement practices for youth in the juvenile justice system. My name is Elizabeth Siegel, and I'm the Grantee Technical Assistance Manager for Juvenile Justice at the Council of State Governments Justice Center. Before turning to the content of today's webinar, I'd like to briefly talk through a couple of house cleaning items about how the webinar is going to work, and then take a brief moment to tell you a little bit about the National Reentry Resource Center. Anytime during this webinar, you can ask a question by typing it into the Q&A panel on the bottom right-hand portion of your screen. We'll keep a running list of the content-related questions that we receive, and then ask panelists to respond to the questions during the last segment of the webinar. We'll do our best to get through as many questions as possible. If you encounter technical or audio problems during this webinar, please call WebEx Technical Support at 1-866-229-3239. Please understand there are some technical issues you'll not be able to resolve, and for this reason, we're recording this event and we'll post it on our website. And we should have the webinar posted online early next week, and once it's been posted, we'll email you a link to the recording. I'll be starting off the webinar with an introduction of our panelists and a brief overview of the Council of State Governments Justice Center and the National Reentry Resource Center. I'll then provide some background on why involving and engaging families of youth in the juvenile justice system is so critical to improving youth outcomes. I'll then discuss CSG's newly released online implementation tools available on this topic area. Finally, we'll hear how two state juvenile justice agencies, Missouri and Indiana, are addressing this topic in their own agencies. Our panelists have offered to address questions as a follow-up to this webinar, and so we'll have their contact information listed before we close out after we engage in an FAQ. I'd like to introduce our panelists today in order of presentation. I'll be kicking us off, followed by Phyllis Becker, Director of the Missouri Division of Youth Services, and Amy Kariazis, Senior Program Administrator. We'll then hear from Christine Blessinger, Executive Director of the Indiana Division of Youth Services, and Natalie Walker, Assistant Director of Indiana Division of Youth Services. The Council of State Governments Justice Center is a national nonprofit organization that serves policymakers at the local, state, and federal levels from all branches of government. We provide practical, nonpartisan advice and consensus-driven strategies informed by available evidence to increase public safety and strengthen communities. The Second Chance Act, which was signed into law in 2008, is the first federal legislation passed by Congress to authorize federal support for reentry programs. The bill authorized up to $165 million in federal grants to state, local, and tribal government agencies and nonprofit organizations. Recognizing how complex reentry initiatives are and the importance of integrating research and evidence into those initiatives, the Second Chance Act authorized the creation of a National Resource Center for adult and juvenile reentry. In 2009, following a competitive process, CSG Justice Center was selected to launch the National Reentry Resource Center and provide training and technical assistance to all other Second Chance Act grantees. The National Reentry Resource Center is supported by the Bureau of Justice Assistance. Since 2009, nearly 600 Second Chance Act grant awards have been made to government agencies and nonprofit organizations from 49 states for reentry programs serving adults and juveniles. Approximately 20% of these grants have been awarded to agencies serving a juvenile justice population. The Justice Center is constantly adding new content and resources to our website, and we send out monthly newsletters that provide updates on the latest research, funding opportunities, distance learning events, and other news about reentry. So we encourage you to sign up for our newsletter by visiting csgjusticecenter.org/subscribe. So why are involving and engaging families so critical to improving outcomes for youth in the juvenile justice system? Research and practice shows that youth who have supportive caregivers have better outcomes than youth with less supportive caregivers. Not surprisingly, this is true across all youth-serving agencies, including child welfare, behavioral health, and education systems. Youth whose caregivers do not provide consistent structure and support are at a far greater risk of engaging in continued delinquent behavior and suffering poor behavioral health, education, and employment outcomes into adulthood. Traditionally, many juvenile justice systems have viewed families more as a problem than part of the solution. Despite purporting to respect and value family engagement in system decisions that impact their children, many agencies have not considered the full range of roles that families can play in system interventions. And furthermore, practitioners often struggle to implement family engagement and involvement policies and practices effectively. So in January of this year, the CSG Justice Center developed a resource for the field to address this key challenge in an effort to provide strategies, tools, examples, and best practice models from across the country that juvenile justice agency managers, staff, and other practitioners may consider adopting to effectively implement family engagement practices and promote positive outcomes for youth in the juvenile justice system. This resource is organized by 4 key challenges we see at CSG through our experiences providing technical assistance to a wide range of state and local juvenile justice systems and through our work with national experts in the field. I'll briefly walk through those now and touch upon some strategies agencies might consider in their own family involvement and engagement efforts. A key challenge is first identifying family members or other supportive adults who can promote positive outcomes for youth. Often jurisdictions struggle to determine who can serve as the youth's natural support and help ensure permanency when the youth is in out-of-home placement or is on parole or probation. One strategy that can be employed is defining families broadly. Families should be understood to include traditional and non-traditional caregivers and other supportive adults, people like teachers, coaches, mentors, and family and youth should be asked who they consider family. This expanded definition can broaden the net of support that can be utilized by agencies to access adults that can help serve as a support and a bridge for youth transitioning from adolescence to adulthood. Another strategy is identifying family members and other supportive adults using visual tools, questionnaires, and other models developed by the field, such as genograms, eco-maps, and approaches designed for youth-serving agencies, such as family finding, which is an approach used in child welfare, and the juvenile relational inquiry tool developed by the Vera Institute of Justice. Another challenge is supporting families in navigating the juvenile justice system and remaining involved with their children. Strategies to consider in addressing this include establishing a culture of alliance with families who have children in the system through methods such as training staff on communication techniques, developing family-focused policies and practices, and examining hiring practices and performance evaluations to better focus on obtaining and retaining a workforce that has family engagement skills and experience, and one that values and encourages this family-focused approach. Another strategy is educating families about their children's experiences in the juvenile justice system. Some sites use family guides or parents' bill of rights as educational tools, and agencies can access these tools as models or templates for their own efforts. Providing peer supports, such as family engagement specialists or family advocates, can also help family members understand the system, stay connected to their children, as can peer or parent support groups that meet regularly to support one another in navigating the process and in supporting their child most effectively. Often we hear from agencies that working with families require time and resources, and so investing in a position or positions that focus on this explicitly can also be valuable. Finally, outreach to families is of course key. Taking initiative in a manner that allows families to view the system as one that supports their child and encourages family partnership in the rehabilitative process. Some jurisdictions utilize scripts as guides for staff who are initiating outreach to a youth's family prior to meeting in person to build that relationship at the outset and increase the likelihood that family members will be actively engaged. So it's one thing, and of course important, to invite family members to participate in key activities in their child's experience in the system, things like case planning and treatment, but the extent to which family members are engaged and empowered in these activities varies greatly across jurisdictions. Families can be involved in supervision and decisions and service decisions through collaborative teaming structures such as family group decision-making or effective practices and community support for influencers. These are models that are coming out and being tested in the field. And then evidence-based models such as functional family probation and functional family therapy can also be utilized. Furthermore, family contact is critical, as research has found that greater contact has had positive impacts on youth behavior in facilities with fewer cited instances of acting out. Jurisdictions such as Indiana, who you'll hear from today, have implemented flexible and inclusive family visitation hours and policies. Others have offered transportation assistance to families to promote more frequent contact when travel is a challenge, which we hear quite a bit. And communication technology such as Skype or video conferencing has also been embedded in practice. Having days to celebrate youth and bring together families can also have great benefit, such as family days or graduation ceremonies, recognizing birthdays and other significant events. Often families are invited when there are challenges or concerns about their child or for any regular case planning, but it's important to be deliberate in celebrating youth's progress and success as we would for a child that's not under supervision. Lastly, but certainly not least, is really speaks to the importance of being able to measure the impact of family engagement. Often jurisdictions will speak and pay special attention to their advancements in family engagement and talk about the strides that are being made, which should not be dismissed, but rather celebrated. However, it's difficult to capture this in a qualitative or quantitative manner. And what we've seen jurisdictions do are implement family and youth surveys that speak to this topic, conduct focus groups to obtain this information, and develop formal bodies such as family and youth advisory groups that can inform changes pertaining to family engagement and help monitor progress. National initiatives have been developed, such as the performance-based standards for youth in correction and detention facilities, which requires participating agencies to survey families and youth to gather feedback on their experiences with the system and overall satisfaction. So to access these tools and use them to even assess your own policies and practices pertaining to family engagement and involvement, and also have access to models, examples, and tools across the country, please visit the tools online at csgjusticecenter.org/youth/family engagement and involvement. On CSG's youth pages, you can also view other resources available for the field on key areas that are critical to improving outcomes for youth in the juvenile justice system. There are a handful of resources on this topic made available by the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention and other leading national organizations. And some of those are listed on this slide and will be made available as a follow-up to this webinar. And now we'll turn to the highlight of the webinar, which is hearing from 2 state juvenile justice agencies who are engaged in efforts to develop family-focused models of practice. I'll turn this segment over the webinar to Director Phyllis Becker and Amy Kariazis, who will discuss Missouri's work. Thank you, Phyllis and Amy.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Elizabeth. And I want to thank Elizabeth and the Council of State Government for this opportunity. I'm Phyllis Becker, and I'm the Director of the Missouri Division of Youth Services, and we're very pleased to be able to be a part of this webinar on family engagement. In looking at our system, it really, for us to fully engage family, we really had to have a shift in our thinking about how we viewed our youth and our families. I know many folks in the juvenile justice system, like us, when we work with our youth, we can really see some of the challenges our families make and some of the decisions they make that have impacted the youth we're dealing with. And so we really had to kind of shift from seeing that as something as bad parents to something as this is a system problem and a challenge for this family, and how can we help this family and their child have better outcomes. So we really had to shift our thinking. We moved from nothing about our families and our agency, beliefs, and philosophy to now that families are vital to the treatment process. We began to look at who defined who the family was, because we were seeing with our youth that there are very important adults in their lives that were having positive impact, that were functioning as family or guardian or parental roles. So we really kind of began to think, who are all the adults that the family identifies as members who are positive to this youth and the outcomes for that youth. We also began to look at how we can support that systemically in the organization. So we have family specialists and who work with families and provide family counseling that are part of all of our teams. And we also moved to a service coordinator role, which I'll talk about in a minute, that works with the families from the point of commitment to the point of discharge. And we've also really worked hard to include family decision-making in the youth treatment plan. When looking at that shift that we had to make from traditional kind of correctional thinking to more a developmental rehabilitative approach, these are some of the shifts that we made, and we are still growing in it. It's always a work in progress, and nobody's perfect, so we're always working at this. So we had to move from just looking at the youth staying out of trouble and kind of shift that our goal is for the youth and family to be productively involved and contributing to their community, that was our role to help them move to that paradigm. We had to begin to shift out of seeing the family as a deficit and part of the problem, and look at the family and work with them and understand that they have assets and that they really do want to help their child, and how can we tap into that natural desire to help their kid, and how can we build on that. We had to, as Elizabeth said earlier, we had to really deal with some systemic barriers that we had in our systems. We had to change policies around who could visit, when they could visit, and how they could visit. For example, traditionally we had Sunday visits, and that was the only time a family could visit. Well, many times you have parents that work or guardians that work, they can't do it, and so we've become much more flexible about working with families to come when they are able to come and scheduling that into the planning. We help families. If a family can't get to our program, our service coordinators and our programs work to get them there. As part of our evolution, we broke down our large institutions, and we now have programs in 5 regions in the state. So that helped us a great deal because our programs are now closer to where the families live. So getting families there it's much more accessible to families. We also focus on, we see the kind of family, neighborhood, community as linking. We also had very judgmental viewpoints about the communities that our families were coming from, and we had to shift our thinking about that and understand that there's assets in any community. When we're not, we understand there's many challenges, but there are also very many assets in those communities that we can work with families to build on to create sustainable change for our kids as they transition back into the community. And we have to really tap into that family with all those challenges and needs, have information about their child that is going to help them and help us make their child successful. We use this Rothenbrenner's ecological model development in our training with our service coordinator, and service coordinators are like case managers, to kind of emphasize the point that in terms of influence, if you look at the circle of influence around the young people that are in our care, we are not those inner circles. And it's the ones that have the most influence that are going to actually have the better chance of impacting long-term change. And so we really had to think about, if we're not that inner circle, we really do have to partner with the community and the parents to influence that kid's long-term change. So this framework really kind of helped us to understand we're in their lives for a very, very small time of their whole natural life. And so we have to use that time there with us in the most strategic way. One of the things we did when we were looking at how to better engage families is we created this visual of all the points in time where families are in our system, and then how could we leverage opportunities around those points in time. So when a youth is committed to us, and I said earlier we shift to a service coordinator model, we back in the 90s moved to having our service coordinators work with our families from the point of commitment to the point of discharge, because what was happening is our families were having contact with different pieces of the system with different workers, and it was confusing. It also didn't allow the opportunity for the families to have this one person that they can develop a relationship with and be a go-to person. So when they're committed, our service coordinators meet with the families, they work with the families on the treatment plan, and continue to get them involved in the treatment plan at the beginning. And then when they're in the programs, the service coordinators visit with them. We do home visits. And when the kids go back into the community, the service coordinators, the parents, and the community are involved in transition planning. This slide shows one of the things we developed to train our service coordinators. We wanted to have some kind of basic expectations for family engagement to help folks get focused on the things that we thought were important and to be more intentional. So I won't go through that, but you can see this is something that has gone over with them in their training. And this one is also something we work with our staff on about, when a family walks in the door, what do we want to do? How do we want to respond? What should our attitude be when we're dealing with the family? And so we ask staff, what are things in these areas that you're already doing? Because our staff, and I'm sure your staff too, do a lot of really wonderful work with families. So what are the things we are doing to support the family in the treatment? How are we being respectful and empathetic? How are we being aware of our own biases and prejudice? And then we ask them to look at what they're doing, and then we ask them to say, what can we do more of? And these are examples of the categories of partnerships we have with our families. We have a set of services and programs that focus on family strengthening and well-being. That includes our treatment plan and our education plans. We talk to the families, not just the youth, about what their goals, needs, and dreams are as well. We talk to the families about their family counseling and site visits. We also have parent support services where we have resource centers. We have day treatment programs that offer services to the families, parent groups, other kind of groups. And we have found that in terms of supportive families, if we're with the families as they go through their triumphs and struggles, they're more likely to be engaged with us. And that could be something as little as if a youth, while they're in your program, they lose their grandparent, that the service coordinator sends a sympathy card. I mean, it can be as small as that to support a family and let them know that you are interested in what's happening with them. We do have family engagement activities, family days, graduation, outings. We have family members that are on our advisory boards as well. We do a survey with all our families at the point of discharge. And then we really work hard for family and community engagement. An example of that is we contract with a community partner to provide online education services. And just this year, both one of our youth and their parent both got their HiSET, which is the GED in Missouri, and walked in the graduation that we have every year together. So that was an example of really working with the family and the kid, and it was really neat to see. Okay. So now Amy's going to talk more specifically about examples of our partnerships.
Hello, everyone. We're going to introduce examples of our partnerships with families and how they are involved in their child's treatment process. This is the...
Hold on just one second. Sorry. I took over moving the slides.
Okay. This is the first page of our comprehensive individual treatment plan, or as we call it, the CITP. In 2012, we revamped our treatment plan, and we wanted to make sure that it was strengths-based rather than focusing on the presenting problem. As you can see, under Part A, the assessment and goals, there's just as much language pertaining to the family as the youth that's in our care. We want to know how our families view success, and we really want to know what their goals are as a family. This way we can develop a CITP that is specifically tailored to that specific youth and family. These changes alone have changed the spirit behind our initial classifications. When we're introduced to a family, they're often scared, they're nervous, they're a little bit wary of the system. But if you start the interview with what are your hopes and dreams rather than what's wrong with your kid, the energy in the room changes and they're much more apt to discuss their child. This is our youth and family worksheet. This is used to complete another piece of the CITP that's focused on the youth transition back into the home and community. Later in the program, the youth will have home visits, and they will take this worksheet home and sit down with their family. They will discuss the core issues of the program as far as what they've learned, what they've accomplished. They will discuss how they're going to maintain their progress and move forward, and most importantly, who are going to help them do those things. And the kid will bring this to the transition meeting later in his program, and this meeting will be the youth, the family, the treatment team, and community members will all be in attendance. So this is a youth genogram. This is one of the first projects that a youth will work on while in our program. It's basically their family tree and identifying patterns within the family. As you can see with this youth, he did document some of the struggles such as addiction or mental health, but he also did include the accomplishments of his family members as, completing his high school education or attending college or independence. It's really interesting for the kids to sit down, discuss their family history with their family, and they see things that they did not even know, that maybe great-grandpa Joe was in the military, or Aunt Sue, who always depended on drugs and alcohol, is now in recovery and has been clean and sober for a few years. Kids see that they're not necessarily the problem, but that they're actually a part of a systemic cycle. DYS has community partners across the state, and each of our regions work closely with the community partnership in their area. These partners provide continued treatment services for the youth and the families once the youth returns home. They connect the youth to recreational activities, including that are promoting youth development, such as youth groups or fun community service events. DYS partners with community members in FAST, which is one of our current family engagement programs. They introduce the family to new community resources. And most importantly, our partnerships provide services and support to the youth and family after the youth is discharged. So this is FAST. FAST was developed by Dr. Lynn McDonald in 1988 in order to enhance the protective factors in young people and their families in the school setting. DYS implemented FAST in 2013 and is the first juvenile justice program to adapt the model to a juvenile justice setting. Since 2013, 178 of our families have graduated the 8-week program. So FAST is a multi-family program that supports family engagement and promotes social support networks. As you can see, the teen FAST goals are very much in line with DYS goals. We want to strengthen relationships. We want to promote youth mastery and leadership skills. We want to positively positively impact the stability of the entire family system, and we want to connect families to other families in efforts to reduce stress and social isolation. These are the family flags. In FAST, at the very beginning of the session, the families will design their family flag. They will, each member of the family will find something that represents them, and this flag will remain on the table throughout the FAST session. This flag is usually accompanied with a family photo and is actually, it strengthens family bonds, but also displays family unity and serves as a protective factor for the family. This is an example of an evening of FAST. The evenings are very structured. We begin with a family meal. This meal is so important because due to family scheduling conflicts or just time restraints, many families aren't able to sit down and share a meal with each other. And we actually had a conference very recently where we had some families that came and spoke about their experience with FAST. And the one thing they did mention was how much they enjoyed the family meal because she and her husband both worked evenings and rarely got to share a meal with their family. So this became a protected time, and they knew that was always guaranteed in the FAST session. And research shows that youth who regularly have meals with their family are less likely to get into fights, smoke, drink, and use drugs at the same time that their academic performance tends to improve. They will then separate into the youth and parent group. These are two social support groups that will allow parents to connect with other parents and the youth to connect to their peers. This is followed by one-to-one time. This is 15 minutes of protected time, allowing a private discussion between the youth and the parent. Then the evening ends with the family reciprocity and the closing circle, which builds group unity and gives the families a sense of community. So here are some comments from our FAST participants. In all of our regions, we have at least one FAST cycle a year, and these are some of their comments statewide.
So those were some examples of our family engagement process. These are some of the challenges that we encounter and have to work with every day, and I'm sure many of you guys who are working with families experience these challenges as well. We have families that really come to us with a mistrust of systems. They've not had good experiences with systems, so we really work hard to help build trust with the families and be a different kind of system for them. Again, we are engaging with very complex family systems with lots of challenges and histories, so that's a challenge as well. Many times our families who are in our system have other systems issues and are somewhat isolated from other people, other families going through the same thing, and so kind of making bridges and connecting families is one of the things we work hard to do. Creating those connections in the community for our youth and families. Again, for us it was a shift in thinking. Our service coordinators were really used to working just with the kids and now with the families, and now we're saying you got to work with the community, so that's been a shift and a challenge, changing our thinking about what's important for us to do to help kids have sustainable change. And then, you know, there's the challenges in the community and neighborhoods that we work with. And then every day we're dealing kind of what are the system barriers that are keeping us from truly engaging families. So that's it for Missouri, and thank you so much for listening.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm Chris Blessinger, the Executive Director for the Division of Youth Services for Indiana, and I'm going to just start by just discussing a few initial strategies that we did. As Phyllis said, we also had to have a shift in our thinking regarding families. So the first thing we did, we reviewed data. We used performance-based standards, so we looked at visits and phone calls and those numbers. Then you have to go and create buy-in with staff. So staff had concerns at first. Some of their concerns was there going to be a problem including families more? If we increase visitation, do we have enough space? Do we have enough staff to cover that? We are also working with Vera on a project correlating behavior to family visits. Does behavior improve visits? That's something that we're looking at. And then also, this also impacts on youth reintegration. Having families involved helps with reintegration and families with reintegration. We have what we call reintegration specialists that work with the youth while they're currently in the facility and then with their families once they're released. So to start it all off, we partnered with Performance-Based Standards, PBS, and Vera on piloting a family survey. So we did that family survey at 2 of our facilities. We did it at our female facility and then our largest male facility. The survey included questions about facility contact with family regarding visitation, progress through the program and aftercare planning, family opinions about those contacts, and if they were contacted about programming, setting up treatment plans, frequency of visits, phone calls, and involvement in release planning. The survey has actually evolved now to even include questions regarding trauma. It has consistent updates regarding progress and behavior, et cetera, for youth. So after that initial collection of that initial survey that we did, we realized the importance of identifying the right person to present the survey to the family. At one facility, the staff would give the survey to the parent, and then at the other facility, the survey was presented and discussed, and actually discussed with the parents, you know, why it was important, why we were doing this. And so then there was a higher completion rate at the facility discussing with the parent the importance of the survey and describing the information's purpose. So we started looking at the surveys after that data collection, and we had a snapshot of our facilities in regards to, you know, family engagement. We recognized that there were areas with the family involvement that we were doing well, and then we also recognized that there were several areas that we could improve on, one of which was looking at the visitation policy. At that time, we had limited visitation for families. So one facility only had visitation on the weekends, and other facilities had multiple visitation dates, but only allowed the family to visit, like I think it was once a week for an hour. So we changed that policy, and we now allow visitation 7 days a week at all of our facilities. And families are able to attend multiple times and days. They can come every day if they want to come every day. And they are allowed to stay longer than an hour. They'll stay through that whole visiting time that we offer. And then we'll also make accommodations for families if one of the things we don't like to do is take the kids out of education and school, but if the families need to come during those hours, we will specially do whatever we can to accommodate those families. Another thing that we did was we instituted family orientation. Prior to visiting, the parent and guardian must attend what we would call a family orientation session. During that orientation session, the staff discussed like the visiting rules and like, you know, in addition to an overview of the facility, talk about our level system, treatment groups, educational programming, and then any kind of other family events and programming and volunteer activities that we offer. So we also instituted and started doing family councils. Family councils comprised of basically the facility head or a designee would actually run these meetings, and we would have family members of the youth come to the facility and have meetings. They'd meet about once a month, typically after a visitation time. It is an opportunity for the facility to discuss any kind of new initiatives that are going on, any kind of changes, and any kind of upcoming events that we are having. Facilities are also able to share ideas and concerns and voice their opinions and suggestions with the families are able to do that and voice any concerns and opinions and suggestions to the facility. The promotion of the family council meetings is also important because we need to make sure that they're able to know about it. With youth commitments being shorter, then we have to anticipate a turnover of those families coming in and out. So selecting the right person to oversee that council at the meetings is also important. We recommend that it should be the same person and an individual to be able to make changes or at least communicate them to the facility head if they're not the ones that are running it. Another thing that we did was we started having facility tours. So at first our staff were real hesitant to allow families into our facilities, and we were all real hesitant about it at first. But we really, really trusted that this was the right thing to do. So we have been doing it, and they've been successful. We've been conducting tours now for quite a couple of years now. We offer them at the same time that we will also offer family council meetings or maybe family events, or maybe the families are there for a family session or an education open house or whatever it is that we might have, then we'll give those families the tour. And it's really good because the families will, just all the time tell us that they were worried about knowing what their child, where they were living or what that environment was like, and to see how more comfortable they feel after they see that facility and after they see how the environment is, it's so much better. It makes them feel better. We also we have what we call our Parent and Guardian Bill of Rights, and we also have kind of like a family handbook. So the Bill of Rights are provided to the parents in the welcome packet that we always give them once we get a youth to us. It outlines 9 rights of the parent and guardian, such as the right to be informed about matters related to their child's welfare, behavior, events, progress, medical conditions, anything really. The right to be assured that the DYS staff are professional and respectful, and the right to expect DYS provides a safe and secure environment for their child. The Family Handbook is also a guide and provides answers to just common questions that they might have. It outlines the process from intake to release, general rules, and how to contact facility staff. So when we also talk about family engagement, we talk about some programming. So family counseling is one of the things that we do offer. Most of our youth will return back to their parents or guardians, and that we realize that. So we have to do what we can to help them. Mental health staff invite the family to the facility to conduct those family sessions, and then during those sessions, staff and families discuss previous issues, any situations, anything that that they need to do to better handle, coping skills, and anything that they can to prepare them to go home. The goal is to address the issues and concerns and just get them to develop some sort of action plan and get ready for any future situations that they might have. We also conduct treatment team reviews with the youth. We do that about every 2 to 3 weeks to check on their progress in all their areas: education, programming, their behavior, just looking at everything. And then the families are invited to participate in that. And we invite them in person, but a lot of times the families need to do that by phone. But we always offer that opportunity by phone. The families this is great because it gives the families an opportunity to see how the youth are doing, have input on their treatment progress, and just be a part of what they're doing. It involves and creates a real supportive system around the youth and their program. Another thing that we do for incident reviews is when a youth is involved in a situation, whether it be possibly a use of force incident, if there's an injury, or just any kind of situation that occurs, the family is contacted. In that incident review, we have the parents and the kids. We usually will have the parents on the phone, and we have them participate in that debriefing. So the parents are, advised of the situation. We let them know what happened, and then that gives them an opportunity to ask any questions or maybe have any input towards the youth, or you know, it gives them an opportunity to encourage their child to make better choices if if it was a bad situation, or to just to comply with the rules to try to help them to get home. We have also have we work very collaboratively with our mental health staff, and mental health staff have frequent contact with the youth's family, especially if changes are occurring in medication, we include them. Each youth is seen by mental health will have a staffing, and that mental health provider, in addition to facility staff, all are present at the mental health staffing, and will meet and discuss the youth's progress, any kind of concerning behaviors, anything like that. So now I am going to turn it over to Natalie Walker, who is the Assistant Director for the Division of Youth Services.
Thanks, Chris. I'm going to talk about some of the facility engagement events we have at our facilities. Twice a year we have some open houses that are through our education department at the facilities. They invite the families to these open houses, and the family meets with their child's teachers and review their progress. Besides meeting with the youth education staff, the families are provided often a meal, some visiting time with their child, and as Chris mentioned earlier, we do facility tours at the same time. Family Fun Days are another activity we have at our facility. So every 3 to 4 months, the facilities invite families to participate in what we call a Family Fun Day. The day consists of playing games with their child, sharing a meal. Sometimes the youth are the ones preparing the meal, and often a gift presentation. If the youth does not have a family to invite to these Family Fun Days, often we let them invite a staff person to be a representative of that family. Families are also invited to participate in programming and volunteer activities with their child. At one facility, there's a therapeutic community for substance abuse. The youth in the program participate in AA and NA meetings. The parents are able to attend the meetings with their child. Parents are also allowed to attend chapel services with their child. When families attend the meetings and services, they gain a better understanding of the programming their child is participating in and more tools to support their child upon his or her release. The facilities also invite parents to graduations. The quarterly task and high school graduation ceremonies are held at each facility. The families are invited to attend these graduations. The ceremony is very similar to a public high school graduation. The youth wear caps and gowns. They parade with pomp and circumstance playing in the background and listen to the education principal addressing the graduating class. They often have a valedictorian that has a speech prepared, and then the principal presents the diplomas. After the ceremony, pictures are taken with the youth and their families, which the family will receive a copy of, and a celebratory meal is offered. One facility offers a family workshop once a quarter, which they call Healthy Families. During the workshop, mental health conducts a presentation about coping techniques their child is learning at the facility. Counselors also do an overview of the treatment groups at the facility. There are individual meetings between the family and the treatment staff to discuss the youth's progress and release plans. Again, family tours are offered during this workshop, and activities with the families, games, and there's a meal too. For those students that do not receive family visits, for reasons including but not limited to like financial or transportation issues, lack of involvement, a volunteer group at our facilities has a no-visit party. The counselors submit the list of youth that qualify, and the party is once a month. During the time, the volunteers engage in fellowship with the students and have games and food for them. A couple of our facilities assign staff members to mentor youth to help the youth transition into facility culture and provide a resource for the youth. During the meetings, the staff talk with the youth about their weekly goals, participation in programming such as education and treatment, interactions with students on the unit, and any safety concerns, such as being threatened or any fears, and also family contact. The meetings occur on a weekly basis, but can be more or less frequent based on the youth. Mentors complete a form and provide the information to their supervisor to ensure meetings are occurring, and treatment staff compare the notes on the youth's adjustment. Like mentioned before by Phyllis, we also have some challenges with family engagement. One of them is that we only have 4 facilities in the state of Indiana, and we serve all 92 counties within this state. We try to classify the youth close to the family, but that is not always possible given the youth's needs and risks. and that there's only one female facility, which is located in southern Indiana. So if the youth family is from way up north, say near Chicago, it would be almost a 6-hour drive for the family to visit with their youth just one way. Another challenge that we have is transportation. In addition to the distance, not all families have reliable transportation or the money to get to the facility for visitation and to participate in these events. And we are not able to offer participation for the families. As previously stated, the location of our facilities in comparison to the family residence is a challenge. Like we said before, it could be almost 6 hours between the family's residence and the youth facility. After involvement with the criminal justice system, some parents do not actively participate in the youth program. So we have some non-participating families. And it is very difficult for us to engage these families. We try and encourage involvement as we spoke about the different events we have at our facilities and discuss the importance of the involvement in programming the youth because that youth is returning to that home, but sometimes they are still resistant to participating. Another problem we had in the past was the approval process. In the past, it was difficult for the family to visit due to this approval process. All of our visitors must apply to go to visitation and undergo a criminal background check. Previously, the facilities that did this background check were adult facilities and would take a while to get the information back to our juvenile facilities. Now the checks are being done at our juvenile facilities, which has helped process them quicker and allow the guardian to come and visit sooner. We also allow intake facilities to allow the guardian to visit prior to the background checks. So here's some data. This is the data that Chris referred to that we talked about with the family survey. So I show on this graph where we started at in October of 2012, and I showed the previous, some data collections for the past 3 years. Here are some slides that demonstrate how we've improved our family involvement. The information is derived from that family survey, and we're showing the difference between the initial survey and our current information. So in October of 2012, 51% of our families reported they had participated in an orientation meeting. And now we're averaging about 66 to 68% saying yes to that question on that survey. Then we have a slide regarding the percent of families saying they were given a tour of the facility. As you can tell, there was a significant jump from 2012 to our current number, which is remarkable. We only had one facility giving tours in 2012, which is why we only had 18% of families stating they had participated in a family tour. Now that all of our facilities offer the tour, approximately 45% of the families now state they are given a tour of the facility. Visitation. And in October 2012, 58% of the families stated they had visited their child while in the facility. And in the last data collection, you can see there seemed to be a considerable drop from the previous 2 data collections in youth receiving visits. There are several factors that contribute to the decrease that we've already discussed, the transportation, the distance, the financial impact, and family not willing to participate. So as an agency, we are working to develop plans to combat some of those issues and overcome them so that we can see an increase in family visitation. On this graph, there are 2 bars. The light bar is the percent of families that stated they had received a call while their child was at the facility. And the darker blue, which is the one in front, is the percent of youth or families that reported they engaged in phone calls more than once a week with their child. So as you can tell, in October of 2012, 91% reported talking to their child on the phone, and 43% said they had phone calls more than once a week. And in the last few data collections, we've maintained 93% of phone calls for the families, and around 50 to 53% receiving calls more than once a week. As we spoke about previously, our facilities have really worked at including families in treatment and incident reviews in addition to general check-in calls, which is the reason why we had this increase. Our last slide is a percent invited to family events, and Chris and I are still astounded by this graph. It's just proof of our great work our facilities have done to engage families and increase the ways families can become involved with their child. In October 2012, we had only 56% of the families stating they have been invited to facility events and programs. Now we're at 80% of the families stating they have been invited to these programs. So we're really astounded and happy, and we're always continuing to look on new ways to engage our family. So this is just an overview of how Indiana has increased family engagement and the processes that we have done to improve that.
Great. Thank you, Phyllis, Amy, Chris, and Natalie. This portion of the webinar is going to be devoted towards addressing the excellent questions that have been coming in over the course of this webinar. Again, just as a reminder, if you have a question, haven't yet shared it, you can do so now by typing it into the box in the lower right-hand portion of your screen. And we'll do our best job at getting through as many of these as possible before the close. So the first question is directed to Missouri, the question about the role of mentors. So can you speak on if you include mentors as part of the community network for youth? And if so, what does your process look like for embedding mentors in agency practice?
Thank you, and good question. We have contracts with community partnerships who hire community staff to be mentors to our kids. And so we have those community mentors. Then we also have state mentors that we hire, and there's social service aides is their state title, but they're community mentors as well. And many times this can be, we tend to get either very young, fresh out of college, or we have people who retired from social service agencies. And so they are assigned to kids, typically geographically, and they work with the service coordinators to provide kind of a continuum of services in the community with those mentors.
Great. Thank you, Phyllis. So this question is to both Missouri and Indiana folks. This question speaks to the importance of building a culture that values and respects and encourages families as part of the change process for a young person. So Missouri and Indiana, can you talk about how you worked with and continue to work with managers and line staff to help shift or encourage agencies' beliefs and philosophy around family partnership, and what are some of the challenges you've faced as you've gone through this process? And Missouri or Indiana, either of you can kick us off.
I'll talk. This is Natalie from Indiana. So one of the things Indiana has is our onboarding of staff. We do a general overview of, just DOC policies, but then we have what's called the MAC Academy, and Making a Change Academy, which is juvenile specific. So during that week, our staff, that includes our custody staff, our treatment staff, anyone that's going to work in our juvenile facilities, we give them information regarding trauma-informed care, and we talk about, how the youth are developing, like emotionally, how to deal with kids with mental health issues. So part of that is just talking about adolescents and engaging families and talking about how families could have caused some of that trauma and how we can kind of work on some of those issues while they're in our facilities. So giving them that week of the MAC Academy, which is juvenile-specific training, kind of helps foster that mentality of we got to think about this youth going home and how do we address the issues they came in with so that they don't come back to us.
Thank you.
This is Phyllis with Missouri. And as part of our, as we were starting to shift our thinking about kids and families, we began developing our kind of basic values. And in those values, we have a value around family and family involvement. And we also have a value around looking systemically at these, at family systems and communities. So people are looking at the whole picture of family, not just the behavior we're seeing and reacting to kind of the symptoms we see. Our treatment values, our staff are trained in that in the first 3 months they come in, so they get that there. We also have what we call our DYS fundamental practices, which is a set of expectations, and part of those expectations are around how we treat each other, treat families, treat partners, those kind of things. Our staff also, all staff get 8 hours in family systems training, and then we also later in a frontline staff career, they can also probably after the first year or second year can participate in a much more extensive family systems training, which can be anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks, and also includes them working with the family and getting feedback from their peers about how they were doing it. So we do, or they do tapes of their family sessions and get feedback. So those are some of the things we offer. And I think probably one of the bigger things is it's the day-to-day stuff and our team meetings that, if people are kind of getting skewed on how they're talking about families, that, we really encourage our leadership and team members to, it's okay to say, hey, we don't look at families that way, or there's something behind that behavior, or, remember what we believe about families, no matter how tough they are. So you have to kind of deal with it in the day-to-day reaction, because it can be tough. You're dealing with the kid and you hear their history, and, you get frustrated, and you could get, that can bleed out into how you interact in your words and actions. So we really try to help ourselves and each other to kind of stay true to our values.
Thank you, Phyllis. These next set of questions are directed towards Indiana, and it's about Indiana's visitation policies and efforts. The first question is, how did you address concerns with having enough staff and space for the increased visitation options?
Okay, so, well, space-wise, we're actually lucky at most of our facilities because we have visiting rooms for visiting. So we already have staff that were staffed for visiting rooms, so that really wasn't an issue for us. We were a little concerned about what we were afraid of is that we would have a bunch of families showing up all at the same time. But what we actually found is that when you open it up to be able to visit every single day, and you can come as much as you want, you just kind of see families that we didn't see like a tremendous amount of increase at every single visit. So we just saw people started to come at different days, but people would still pick their days and come. So we never really saw an issue, believe it or not, with overcrowding or with it being much of a staff issue.
Great, thank you, Chris. And again, keeping with this topic of visitation, could you talk about some of the challenges you may have experienced rolling out these statewide policies across the different facilities? And can you also talk about sort of what facilities we're talking about? Have these elongated visitation options been tried in detention facilities as well? So I guess this is a two-part question.
Well, we don't oversee the detention centers, so I'm not sure as much about the detention centers as I would be our correctional facilities.
Great. And so the second part of that question is just around the rollout of these policies in the different facilities that you do have and you are using. Can you talk about some of the challenges in that process?
Yeah.
Our policy is a statewide policy, so all of our juvenile facilities will be compliant with those expectations that are set through that policy. And one of the things I think Chris and I really kind of pride ourselves on is before we roll out changes to a policy, we have conversations with our facilities regarding their concerns, getting their input, and addressing those concerns and inputs before we make it into our policy. So when we talked about, like she said, the staffing issue, that was one of those things we talked about, like how could we staff it, and we found that we could finagle it and work with those things. But and those are just one of those areas where we really want the input from your facilities because they're the ones that are going to actually live and do this. And also, once you put out a policy, come back to it and look at it and see if it's working, to have that conversation back with your facility. Some of the times what we do is we'll have a discussion and we'll actually put things into place before we change our policy to see if there's going to be any issue before we actually make it in the black and white policy before we send it out and make it the expectation.
And then another thing that I also did was I challenged every facility to come up with ideas and ways that they could include families. That way, that helped with the buy-in so that it was their ideas. So one facility came up right away with, hey, I'm going to include families in volunteer activities, so they could come and they could go to religious services and they could spend the time with them there. And then another facility came up with the workshop, the Healthy Families Workshops, where they had all the families coming in on a weekend and they presented programs and they did all of that. So it was like it was a challenge for all of them to come up with different ideas, and it was great because everybody came up with some really creative ideas, and that really helped with that buy-in.
That's terrific. And buy-in is so important. And it's great to hear about how you've deliberately followed up on these changes and receive feedback from staff. This question is for both Indiana and Missouri. Are families allowed to call their youth directly, or are they only receiving calls from youth? What does that contact look like?
I mean, I can answer that if you need me to. In Indiana, so they can't call the youth directly, but if they need to speak with the youth right away, they just call the facility, talk to the counselor, talk to a staff, and we will get the message or get the message to the counselor and then let the kid call home.
Ours is similar to that in Missouri. Great.
Thank you. And this next question is for Missouri. Can you talk more about the family participation in an advisory board? Is it a family advisory board, or is it an external advisory board that family members are represented on? And if the latter, who else is on that kind of advisory board?
So we have a statewide advisory board that is comprised of citizens from all over Missouri. And we have parent or guardian participation on that. We also have youth participation on that. All of our programs have community liaison councils, and some of those which are community members who are involved with supporting our programs, and sometimes our parents are involved on that decision making. And with our newly implementation of the FAST program, part of that program is after they complete that program, the families can continue to get together, and so they become a group that is really useful and helpful to our staff in terms of, you know, things they think might work better, giving us feedback, helping us understand if we're doing, you know, if we're really meeting the needs of the family.
Great, thank you. We've received a few questions that are focused on addressing the cultural differences within families. So could both Missouri and Indiana speak to how you address the cultural needs and differences in families, how families, different cultures and backgrounds, ethnicities, religions are incorporated and engaged in practice?
Well, you know, one of our beliefs are that, you know, every youth is unique and special, and that our treatment needs really need to be customized around that. And so and also in our treatment plans, we really look and talk to the families about what's important to the family and what is important to them in terms of treatment. And so, you know, if we have kids, you know, when we're looking at cultural differences, we really try to customize our treatment planning to take those factors into consideration. And we also try to be topical. So if there's something going on in the neighborhoods that our families are in, for example, we reach out to the families. and to see if they're okay. So when Ferguson happened in Missouri, all of our service coordinators contacted every family that was in that area to see if they were okay, what was going on, those kind of things. So we really try to, customize it based on what those needs are, and so we are adequately supporting our kids and their families during their stay with us. I'm trying to think of some other examples.
Flooding.
In one of our communities we had, there's something going on in that community. Because some of these things can be geographic as well. So we had flooding, we had some severe flooding. Our kids were out there helping with that. We contacted all of our family members to make sure that we were dealing with those family members. And in our rural areas, that could be a very isolated thing. But, we had the expectation every family was going to be contacted to see if they were okay. So we really try to, customize it based on, their individual, religious, community, and personal needs. Hope that answered that.
Thank you, Phyllis. Appreciate that. To the Indiana team, did you want to share anything, or should I move to the next question?
I mean, we do things very similar to what Phyllis said. I mean, just getting that family input through the intake process all the way through the treatment process and then to release, you want to be individualized and yet respectful of each family and their needs. And that's kind of what Phyllis was speaking on and did a great job of explaining.
Great, thank you. So this next question is focused on the family engagement efforts that are happening once a youth is released from a facility back home. Can you talk about the efforts that are made to ensure that families continue to be part of that parole experience, and as well as when a youth is released from system supervision, what that type of family contact and engagement looks like?
So in Missouri, and part of our presentation when we were talking about our treatment planning, we have 3 parts to our treatment plan, and Part A is the assessment, Part B is the strategies, and then Part C is transition. And so that process begins while they're in the facility, and Amy had talked about the transition planning team, and we really try to, at those meetings, and we're at various places in our system, but is to involve not only the family, but key people from the community. So we ask the kids and the family, like, who's a safe adult for your child when he's at home? And so it might be a coach, it could be a pastor, and we try to get them to come to those meetings before and them to agree to, be a part of the self-care plan for this young person. When they, and so also because our service coordinator has been working with this family from the point of commitment, they already know about the family, they know about the household, because they are required to visit them even when the kids are in residential care. So as soon as they move out to the community, that service coordinator is right there. We have we have a graduated, and I'll let Amy talk about it because she used to be a service coordinator, but when they go to the community, there's real kind of guidelines about how much contact they have, and Amy could say a little bit about that.
Yeah, once the youth is released onto aftercare, as Phyllis stated, the service coordinator is working with them from day one. So there's already a really strong relationship that's already been built between the SC and the family and the kid. So, and also during that time, at the initial phases of aftercare, you're having school meetings where you're trying to transition them back into the school. There's plenty of aftercare groups where we get all the kids together in that certain community. That way they can support one another, because transition is such a difficult, maybe challenging time for the kids. So that way, them having each other and able to talk about their struggles and solutions, it just helps that kid through the transition process. Excuse me. We also have different activities. We have community service activities that we still get all the kids on aftercare. And during that whole time, when we're doing these things with the youth, we're also, we're inviting families to attend these groups or to participate as well. And again, whenever it's the SC that goes to pick up the youth for these activities, and that there's always been a conversation, and you're still engaging the family even during the aftercare phase. If anything, it's probably one of the most important times.
So, In Indiana, we also have reintegration specialists that work with the youth while they're still in the facility and work with the families. We require what we call placement confirmations for every youth that is released from our facility, so that reintegration specialist goes to the home, makes sure that they're meeting with the families before that youth is released, and that is done with every youth. But however, I guess the negative part of this is that we are, because of the minimal number of reintegration specialists that we have and the connections with the family, that we can only supervise on community supervision, parole, youth that are released that are high risk, youth that are released and placed in a residential placement, or adjudicated sex offenders. So all of those youth that are low and moderate risk, if we have some that are low, but most are moderate, are just discharged from our facility. So the follow-up with that reintegration specialist and working with that family isn't there with those kids, but the kids that are the higher risk and the ones that need that supervision the most, that reintegration specialist is working with that family and that youth the whole time the youth is in the facility, and then once they're released, they have a requirement that they're spending, they're almost seeing that youth every week.
Great. Thank you both. So this next question is focused on the surveys that families receive. What advice would both your teams have for other agencies who might be considering adopting and implementing family surveys? How can agencies make the most of these surveys and use the results to make meaningful change so that families feel their voices have been heard? I think I would sort of add to that other ways to capture information like family focus groups or interviews. How do you take that information and incorporate that into your policy and practice changes?
I would say one thing to think about with the surveys. Were you going to say something?
No, I didn't know if we were talking about our post surveys.
Yeah. It's one of the challenges we have with our survey. We have a very nice one. It's really getting the surveys to the families and getting them returned. So as much you can integrate it into your process and are there with the families when they fill it out and just get it then.
Absolutely. Or
make it easier for them. You have self-stamped envelopes, those kind of things help get your return better. So that is a challenge for us with our survey piece. We have done some focus groups with our families, and we found those very useful. We use the information we got from those focus groups to share with our leadership teams and our program teams as well. Some of the things the families reported out in those focus groups. So it's a very nice, good process. Families do feel like they're being listened to and heard. And we didn't really do a traditional focus group around, what did they think about our services. We really wanted to understand better things about how they viewed success, what things work for their family, what things don't work for their family, so we could be better service providers. We were getting at that level with our focus groups. But I would say as much as you can get it with, make sure the families, while you have them, to give that kind of feedback, the better off you are than trying to get it when they're outside your system. Sorry, Chris.
Oh, that's fine. I thought you were done. Sorry. One of the things that I think is important, and I think I said this when I was talking about the survey, it's very, very important on who you select to actually talk with the families about it when you're giving them the survey, because if you don't explain to them the purpose of it and what you're using it for, they're going to be more inclined to not do it. So you've got to take the time to do that and really spend the time with the families explaining why that survey is important, and then you as a team at your facility, you've got to review those. So instead of reviewing once every 3 or 4 months when you have all of these surveys that you're reviewing, just take a look at them every week. Look at the ones that you have, review them every week, and then you can talk about them in your department head meetings, your meetings that you have with all of your staff, and then you can, that's a good way to be able to determine if there's any changes or anything from those that you want to make. You can also talk to the families during family councils about it. So we received these family surveys, and these were some of the results from them. Do you guys have any suggestions on how to implement this or do this or whatever? So I think that is a way that you can get, share that result with the families.
Great, thank you, Phyllis and Chris. It's very helpful. So this next question is focused on this population of crossover youth who have involvement in both the juvenile justice and child welfare system. So for youth who are coming from the foster care system or in the system and or whose families aren't willing to have them home, again, for various reasons, what are some of your strategies for working with the child welfare agency and or finding some type of permanency and support for when a youth returns home?
So in Indiana, we actually have a really good relationship with our Department of Child Services, and so when we have youth that don't have anywhere to go or don't have a placement, we are staffing those cases with the Department of Child Services. In fact, we have staffings with them every couple of weeks on those real hard, difficult cases. So their involvement has been huge in Indiana, and we all work together to try to find the best placement for those youth. And then we're in constant communication on what would be the next step, trying to find a permanency plan for that youth.
In Missouri, we are fortunate to have a crossover statewide team that is looking at those issues, and so we are really getting better at kind of looking at what those crossover needs are and working with the Children's Division around those the hard-to-place kids, also looking at how, what can we do to maybe not have those kids committed to us, because really the only issue is they don't have a family. So we're having those kind of conversations with our child welfare system. We're very lucky that the former Director of Division of Youth Services now runs Children's Division, so he has a very good understanding of what we're going through, having been intimately involved with the Division of Youth Services. But like Christina was saying, where we have cross-discipline teams, we have better outcomes for those kids. And we've also had some really good luck connecting with our Department of Mental Health and have a champion over there that's really helping us with those kids that are hard to place, the kids who have multiple traumas, who really need a lot of support and services while they're in the program as well as when they transition out. So the more we can do the kind of cross-divisional stuff, the better we have found that we're able to meet those kids' needs.
Great, thank you both for that. This next question speaks to a common challenge we at CSG and others hear when talking to agencies about family contact, and that is just the transportation concerns and limitations. Family members might have multiple children, so they have to choose between being home or seeing their child, have to choose between using the gas to go to work that day or get to the facility. There are a handful and host of reasons why this is a challenge. Phyllis or Amy, can you talk about how you went about identifying and securing the resources and support to be able to transport families to see their children?
So we had talked in our presentation about the community partners, and so internally what we do is our service coordinators, that's part of their expectations, is that part of their goal is to help families have contact with their kids. So we really do support them if they can't get there. We have service coordinators will go get family members. If we have we're regional based, so we don't have this very often, but if somebody has to travel really long, we will support them staying in a hotel so they can visit their family. We had to change some of our policies. We had a policy around, if families could ride in state vehicles and things like that, we had to get all that changed. And then we also have these community partners externally who help us as well. So they will help, for example, you know, one of our regions, the community partners help the families get their car fixed. We had community partners who, many of our community partners will provide us with gas cards,
car seats
for the younger kids, things like that, to help make, you know, take away those barriers that keep families from being able to see their child. So those are just some of the examples for us.
Great. Thank you, Phyllis. So this next question is about youth with children of their own. Can either or both of you speak to what types of services and supports are provided for youth with their own children? Is there a connection with community support programs that you're able to utilize for this population?
Well, in Indiana, we kind of take every case with that individually, so I couldn't tell you a blanket statement of what we do with each one, but I know that that treatment team, including mental health staff, including the parents, the guardians of the youth that have their children, we all just try to work together and try to figure out the best, you know, plan and transition plan to make sure that services are set up for that purpose.
This is A.V. Missouri, and we follow the similar thoughts as well in Missouri. We do have many kids that have had children, and again, the service coordinator will make every attempt to bring the baby up to see their parent. As we stated earlier, we've gotten car seats from community partnerships in order to bring the kids because they didn't have those things. Also, our family specialists work closely with parents and teach them parenting skills and even facilitate visits between them and their young children.
Great. Thank you both. So we're just running up on 30 minutes past the hour, and we have a slide in front of you with our contact information listed. So with the remaining time, I encourage you to make note of the panelists' information in the event there were questions we weren't able to answer today. If you're looking for specific tools or resources, our panelists have graciously been willing to provide their email for you, so I encourage you to take advantage of that. I want to thank all of our panelists for participating in this afternoon's webinar. And for folks on the line, after you exit the webinar, you'll see a survey appear on the screen. By answering the questions in the survey, you'll be helping us to improve on the services that we offer through the NRC and the products we produce for the field moving forward. So we'd greatly appreciate if you would take just a few minutes to complete that survey. Just as a reminder, we'll be emailing a link to the recording of this presentation, as well as a link to a PDF of the PowerPoint slides used in the presentation early next week. And these links will also be made available on the National Reentry Resource Center's website. Again, if you haven't done so already, please remember to subscribe to the National Reentry Resource Center's newsletter at csgjusticecenter.org/subscribe. Thanks everyone again for your participation, and have a great day.